So that's the booby trapping part. Next, we'll sort of move on to the drone part. And there's been so much. The drone stuff is just out of control. I can't keep up with the number of drone videos and variations of drone dropped or kamikaze style drone delivery systems. There's just so many of them.
Yeah.
The origins of this is Syria or Iraq. So very early on in the conflict there, so in the teens, you would have rudimentary modified 40 mil or other style pieces of ordnance getting dropped from drones. So that was here and there through that conflict. And then obviously since 2022, it started and it's accelerated to the point where both sides are using all sorts of modified submunitions, modified hand grenades, or 3D printed ordnance to drop on the enemy.
Legends, have you ever wondered just how much of your personal information is online? From putting in your name, your address, your email into certain websites, maybe text, all of this, where does that actually then end up? And I think with just a simple Google search, you could be shocked about how much of your private information is actually exposed online and that people could actually get on almost anyone. And why do you think that we all keep receiving spam phone calls and emails every single day, especially this time of year, getting more and more? And I, for one, I'm always trying to minimize just how much of my personal data is on the internet. And the reason why people want this is data brokers make an absolute fortune selling your information to robocallers, spammers, and others who just want to learn more about you or maybe where you live. Well, today's video sponsor will help you clear up this issue. Aura are an identity protection service, and the way it works is they scour the internet looking for any of your information that has been made public. Aura then identifies the data brokers who are exposing your information and will then submit opt-out requests on your behalf. These brokers are legally required to remove your information if you ask them to do so. And the reason this can be so difficult is just finding where it actually is in the first place to then opt out, and they can make it hard to do, but Aura will handle it all for you. As well, you can customize with Aura exactly what you want blocked, and they will also contact you when they pick up that someone is searching for your email, your phone number, where you live, and will ask you if you want it then deleted. And as you know, I'm an absolute tech noob, and this is really easy to set up, and you don't have to download several things to get everything from parental controls, antivirus, VPNs, password management, identity theft, insurance. You don't have to have several things. Aura can do that all for you at one affordable price. And you can either let people continue to exploit and profit off your private information, or you can head to aura.com/WillyOAM and get a 2-week free trial. And this, follow that, or it'll be linked down below. So jump on there, have a look and see what comes up. And I think it may shock and surprise you. Thank you, Aura, for sponsoring this video.
Mavics seem to be a very popular choice because they're pretty easy to rig up, and I'll show you a couple of mine. There are a lot of commercially available attachments that simply clip on or strap on to the drone that you could use to drop things. So here's a modified 3D printed tail modified setup. On the drone, there's an octocopter dropping another piece of ordnance, hand grenades, another hand grenade. Here you can see all sorts of different weird and wonderful 3D printed bits and pieces. These are interesting. They're 3D printed, so the explosive goes down the middle, and then it's got this purpose-made frag sleeve around it, so you can fill it with ball bearings. There's all sorts of variants of those. Heaps and heaps of different versions of things that drop single or multiple pieces of ordnance. So I'll just show you if you can see this.
Do you want to go back
Mavic.
Full
Yeah.
class? Yeah.
Yep. So how's that?
Yeah, it's perfect. See your pretty face, mate.
So here's an example. I've got a commercially available, an eBay bought switch thing that just straps around the Mavic. And it plugs in here. You can see there's a strap up here and it clips onto the end. So this model you can see has got LEDs on it. So how this works is on the controller through the telemetry of the drone. You turn the lights on, the front lights, it triggers the light sensitive switch here and it opens this little pull and it just drops the ordnance.
Yeah.
Now there's pros and cons for using homemade versus commercially available explosive. If you get a 40 mil grenade, you have to open the thing up You have to do things to it in order to make sure the fusing system in there is armed. And with an always acting fuse like that, that is a risk. You're running a risk. Anytime you take military style submunitions or any ordnance and you mess around with it and you you make changes to the factory fitted arming process, you're running a risk of an own goal.
Oh, yeah.
Versus homemade explosives or homemade IEDs, impact initiated IEDs. There's a bit more control that can be designed into the factory settings, but at the end of the day, it is a risky process. I've got a couple more examples. So here's another Mavic. So all these drones I bought, they're broken. All of these things that I'm showing you, they're all made of plastic. There's no explosives. They're all inert. These are classroom devices that I use to teach with. This one, it's not plugged into the telemetry of the drone. This one is simply a short range key fob. You press the button and it pulls the pin back and it's going to drop these two submunitions. These ones are designed to arm by wind passing over the vane there, and it spins and there's an internal arming mechanism. So that's an example where you're using the factory fitted arming process fairly safe. The short range of this thing wouldn't be much good if you are trying to employ it over hundreds of meters.
Yeah.
That's where piggybacking off the telemetry of the drone, especially when they ramp up the power of the drone control stations, that's when you've got much more control about delivering the payload where you want to deliver it. This is another example. So this one is designed, it simply clips onto the side. You can see it comes with skids. And when you turn the underside lights of this Mavic on, it opens a little it's a latch that spins and it just releases the submunition. And in this example, I've shown that, they've made a fuse that won't depress because that pin is preventing it. So that is, they've introduced a level of safety for their drone ordnance manufacturer.
I guarantee there's been some horrible incidents with bloody
absolutely
figuring out these drones and bloody pulling these
absolutely.
out. Oh.
Another version, and this is sort of a little bit earlier. This is a Phantom, DJI Phantom. You can see on the back here, I've got a commercial servo system. So these are very easy to get hold of. Servos control things in fixed wing and other drones by turning a power into a push-pull action using the rotation of the servo. This one, I've got 2 pins. So depending on how many times I turn the lights off, it's going to drop one and then the other hand grenade. And these hand grenades just sit inside the housing. The last thing you do is pull the hand grenade pin. So they sit there until you fly it where you need to fly it. And then again, through the lights being turned on of the drone, it'll drop a hand grenade. Commercial Arduino-based microcontroller.
Yeah.
So this is everything here is completely legal, completely off the shelf, commercial consumer stuff. It's the hand grenades that make it effective. They're the hard bits to get, right?
Yeah, which is, if you're in a war zone like Russia, Ukraine, is bloody easy to get hold of. You use commercial cheap parts, reliable commercial parts,
absolutely.
Strap things on. Yeah, I've spoken to people before about that. I think we're going to see a whole legality change around drones in countries like Australia and America, just for how deadly they've proven to be. Absolutely.
So that's sort of a snapshot of drones delivering something and then the drone making it back to be, I guess, rearmed, refitted. And this is a command method of delivering something explosive. So we're not in that sort of anti-personnel side of it. The next part is the kamikaze drones, of which there have been heaps. Oh, sorry, before we get into that, this video shows one of many not recommended methods of battlefield recovery of ordnance. So they've got this dispenser, this submunition dispenser here that they've cut down the side with an angle grinder, and they're opening it up. Now, how these things work is the submunitions are designed to receive a certain amount of force in flight that will internally arm its fusing system. So right now, the status of those submunitions is pretty safe.
Right.
In theory, when it's in the package, in the container.
Than he was, but yeah.
Yeah. So anytime you're taking an angle grinder to something that contains high explosive, you're running a risk.
Yeah.
Anytime you're imparting impact, shock from a hammer you're running a risk. So is it safe? Not really. Do they get away with it? A lot of the times they do.
Right. Because that's an American cluster, isn't it, that they're pulling apart there? Is that what it's saying?
I think that's an M42, a thing that dispenses these M42. So you see all here, it's got the little shaped charge, the copper disc.
Yeah.
And he's pulled all of these out of of this one. That is a Russian one. I'm not sure. I can't remember off the top of my head the name of that submunition, but it's the same kind of process. This one, he cuts it open with an angle grinder, and then he pulls it open and he pulls out all of these little shaped charge containers. These ones are armed when this little ribbon at the back of the submunition gets pulled by the airflow as it's falling down. It pulls back part of the fusing mechanism inside and puts it in an armed state so that when it hits the ground, the impact inertia allows that thing to blow up and punch a hole through the top of a armored vehicle.
Right. Also showing though that they come to the conclusion that it is more effective to not fire these out of a MLRS artillery piece, but to strip it down and use it for instead of one bloody rocket, bomb, whatever, you can make bloody 30 drones out of it.
Yeah, well, look at all the things you could fit there for many different, and the precision of some of these drone drop attacks on armored vehicles is amazing. They would have to have some of the best, probably both sides have some of the best drone pilots in the world.
Yeah, unbelievable.
So moving on to the kamikazes, you can see the picture on the left there. The ones in the dark blue tape, I believe, are thermobaric warhead, and the one in the middle in the green tape, I believe, is a heat high explosive anti-tank, so a shaped charge, probably copper shaped charge inside. Pretty simple setups. So this is what they call a limit switch. It's just an industry switch. Looks like this. You can get these off any e-store. And basically when it hits the limit of something, if you can hear the clicking there, it changes the state of the internals. So that's how these are designed to work. So when they come into contact with whatever they're targeting, that limit switch changes state and it allows electricity to flow into the detonator. The issue with these is you've got to pull apart the RPG in order to make this. So you're running a risk of removing the factory-made fusing system, and whatever the configuration in the back of whatever item is that you're working with, that's a risk. I've got one here. These are typically done with FPV drones. So this is a very basic setup showing what can be done. I've just got a 9-volt battery. It's connected to, there's a safety switch here.
I'll take us back onto full view. Yeah.
Yep.
There you go.
So I've got the safety switch at the back, and this is just a simple crush setup, which I'll show you when we go back to the slide. So if I arm it now, I've got a detonator in the rear, and this is a mock-up for the classroom. Like, I'm not 100% sure that this is how they're doing it. You fly the drone, so the switch is the last thing you throw. You fly the drone off to its target, and when it comes into contact, it crushes these two switches, and it closes the circuit. You can see the light there light up.
Oh, right. Yep.
So that's how it's designed to work. It impacts the target, and it functions the shape charge from the rear, and it punches a hole of energy through the side of the armored vehicle. There are many different ways that I've seen them set these up. We'll go back to this screen. So I've seen them set up. You've got this dodgy looking dangly wire set up here. That's similar to the setups that I've got. You've got two open wires that are not connected, and when they come into contact, they close. This must be some kind of impact inertia RKG3 shaped charge hand grenade that they've attached. And this one was the limit switch we discussed before. The peg switch is there as an arming function. So that peg switch in its current configuration is open. The contacts are not touching. So if you accidentally knock that switch, it's not going to blow up on you. And it looks like they've got a bit of cord so that as the drone flies off, they hold the end of the cord and it pulls the block away from the peg, allows the peg to close, and now the thing's armed.
Wow.
Issue is obviously if you don't find a target and you have to bring this back to home base.
Yeah. Yeah. God.
Here's a couple other examples. So this one is showing, this is the Russians. showing simple attachment onto a Mavic there. It just clips onto the base of the thing and it plugs into the back. It's how they, so again, they're just piggybacking the telemetry of the drone, and they go on to connect that canister explosive onto the bottom. This is an interesting one. This is from, I think, last month, where they've fitted quite a big drone. So this would be a 6 or an 8 copter style, and they've put a anti-tank mine under it, and they're pretty heavy, and they've got that sort of dropper release mechanism. And it must work, because there's a video of them using it here where they drop it, and fortunately enough, it lands with a fuse side down, if that's how it's set up, and it blows up. And then in answer to, a lot of people say, look, hey, these FPV drones, they're pretty small, you can't lift much with them, etc. It's not true. That the motors on some of these FPV drones are very powerful. Here's an example put out again last month of a couple of RPG warheads being lifted by one of these FPV drones. So it's a fair amount of weight, 3 kilo to lift. A lot of the RPG warheads are less than 1 kilo, or between 1 and 2 kilo, depending on what they are. So definitely within the possibility of an FPV drone, you're just decreasing its performance, decreasing the battery endurance, the heavier you're lifting. So that is pretty much the end of the explosive section. If you wanted to talk about anything else from what we just
mate,
went through?
I think there's going to be a million questions pop up in the comments, but I think you've covered about everything I can think of, going over exactly how the drones and the mines and everything are being used on the battlefield in a real sense, other than just watching videos.
The drone use I think we were chatting about this the other day. The use of drones on the modern battlefield, it has changed the nature of warfare, and will be that way. It's unbelievable the stuff that they're doing on the scale that they're doing it at.
Yeah. Well, you see full production lines in Russia and Ukraine of them building thousands upon thousands of drones, pulling apart munitions that either the West has sent over or the Kremlin has sent to the Russians to the front, pulling apart these weapons to fit them onto drones. And
absolutely
see this in America and Australia's budgets too for military defense spending, is where money's being relieved from some areas and put into drone warfare, because we just know that this is where it's going. And the counters for drones are shithouse. Like, there's no real good counter. Like, heaps of people always hit me up about, but this and that. No, there's no really good counter for them. A net gun, not going to be. You have to see it in the air. These things are. I think people don't understand how fast FPV drones actually are. Like, unbelievably fast, very quiet, considering the battlefield they're bloody on. And to pick up where that sound's coming from and shoot something at it, unbelievably difficult. And yeah, the future of warfare with these is, well, I'm glad I'm not in the bloody infantry anymore.
It's it's wild. I posted something about this the other day. The Ukrainian conflict is arguably one of the most powerful technology incubators that we've seen in modern times. The way that they are adapting things to conduct warfare is incredible. And the electronic warfare test development and deployment is insane. And you're looking at a whole generation of guys, if they survive, are going to be prone to cancers and all sorts of things because of the sheer volume of radiation, RF radiation, that they're getting exposed to. Guys wearing backpack jammers, operating, vehicle-based jamming systems, all to try and prevent these drones. And it's going to cause issues down the track for sure. There's so much electronic warfare going on that front. And even with the advances they've made, like you said, they're still not 100% effective. Electronic warfare can only do so much. Some of these drones that get programmed, I've heard that some of them are getting programmed with AI. So they'll come in above an electronic warfare envelope, a protection or disruption envelope. They'll identify a target by shape, by whatever, and then the AI will, execute a command. So there's no signal to jam. It just comes in and attacks what it's been programmed to do. So it's real Terminator 2 kind of stuff, Yeah,
and that's, I guess, one of the reasons we saw the tires on top of the Russian Tu-95 aircraft was the belief that it's breaking up its signature for AI, that if a drone is above that airfield, that if it has tires on it, if it's looking for a certain shape or a certain heat signature, then maybe it can trick it from there and not target it. That's the only sort of realistic way we've come to the idea that those tires were put on the aircrafts. And it's a scary, incredibly scary battlefield, not only from phones and laptops, and I've even seen the last day or two Red Bull cans with a bloody bomb in them, like an initiator, like you pick up a Red Bull and it explode, all the way through to these drones working in this 24-hour battle space. And these commercially available drones have fantastic thermal and stuff on them. It's unbelievable. For $1,000. You go
and you look at, if you look at World War II, right, where they've done it for a long time with different animals, but you look at the World War II example where they trained dogs to run under tanks and with landmines strapped to their backs, but the dog couldn't discriminate between the enemy's tank and their own tank. So there was lots of cases where the dog would run under their own tanks and they'd have an own goal. Fast forward to AI. Oh, well, we can just tell the AI to attack these vehicles and not these vehicles.
Yeah.
But if you're in a conflict where both sides are using the same weapon platforms, the same MiGs, the same BMP-2s, the same T-72s, it gets difficult again. How do you, and that could be part of the reason why Russia is shooting down a lot of its own aircraft, destroying a lot of its own people and vehicles, because it's so difficult to know who the enemy is.
Yeah. Well, but this is something not spoken about from either side, but there would be huge blue and blue incidents all the time for Russia and Ukraine every day. There couldn't not be, with the jamming of, unreliable radio sources. We already know they've got a lot of problems with command and control, both sides on the front. There would be huge blue on blue, very common.
Have to be.
Not only down to AI, but just movement on the battlefield of such a large space.
Yeah, have to be. Well, should we roll on to the last one, the chemical?
Let's do it. All
right. We've only soaked up an hour and a half so far, so
that's all right, mate. You're doing a great job.
Thank you, mate. All right, so we'll start with the reason, and this really was the reason why I spoke to you some time ago and said it's probably worth a follow-on, is because of these claims, and there are numerous claims on both sides about the use of chemical weapons, and people throwing weird things around about this isn't a chemical weapon, this is, and what it all means. So I thought it'd be good. Let's just look at the scope of what is being claimed. And it really is both sides accusing the other side of breaching the CWC. And we'll get into what is the CWC, what some of the definitions are, who signed up to it, in a similar way that we looked at the Ottawa Treaty. We'll do a bit of a cursory look at, is there any evidence to suggest that chemical weapons are being used? And then, like we've done with all the other stuff, we'll just spitball some ramifications and things like that. So the CWC, yes.
I think we should disclaimer again that we are going to get a legal expert to then break down a lot of this jargon for us as well around what some of it actually means as well.
For sure.
A sensitive topic like this.
Oh yeah, this is any of these international treaties and conventions and stuff, they are massive. Massively important to understand, and words are very carefully chosen in a lot of these protocols and conventions and stuff too. So OPCW is the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. So they are the owners per se of the CWC, which is the Chemical Weapons Convention. This all came about because of World War I, all the use of phosgene, chlorine, and all these other horrible chemicals. They came up with this protocol and said, hey, look, let's not allow this to be done in any future conflict. Fast forward to 1997, or the 90s really, and they did enough back and forward with enough countries that they came up with the CWC. So that's what exists today. The CWC is a convention for the prohibition of the development, production, and stockpiling, as well as the use of chemical weapons, and on the destruction of any existing chemical weapons. It's got a preamble, 24 articles, and 3 annexes. According to OPCW, 193 states are committed, and 100% of declared stockpiles by possessor states have been verifiably destroyed. That's the update as of the end of 2023.
Because am I correct in saying that America destroyed their stockpiles only last year?
I think so, something like that. Russia apparently claimed, I think it was 2017, but then they used Novichok. So there's lots of who knows what's going on.
With a sense of plausible deniability around things.
They just say, well, it wasn't us that used Novichok, so because we don't have chemical weapons.
Yeah, right.
So what are you gonna argue about that one? So Article 1B states never. This is like the Ottawa Treaty. Never under any circumstances to use chemical weapons. Black and white. Article 5 states that riot control agents, of which we'll define shortly, cannot be used as a method of warfare. So we'll get into a little bit about what does that actually mean and all the rest of it. Now, under this convention, law enforcement use of riot control agents is okay. So crowd control and things like that. That's your tear gases and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Now, it's important to note in one of the 3 annexes, they have a clear list of different chemicals, and it's all your usual suspects: VX, sarin, soman, tabin, all these old school hardcore chemical warfare agents. In Annex B, Schedule 3, there's a list of toxic chemicals. There's 4 of them. Very specifically, chloropicrin is stated, and that'll become important later when we get into why we've raised that. OPCW, or the CWC, defines a chemical weapon as a toxic chemical, blah, blah, blah. So what does a toxic chemical mean? Toxic chemical is something that's designed to cause death, temporary incapacitation, or permanent harm to animals or humans. So it's pretty clear, right? And riot control agents would definitely, under this convention, be classed as a toxic chemical, therefore a chemical weapon.
Yep.
Now, both Russia and the Ukraine have signed up to the CWC. They both signed in 1993 when it came out, and they both ratified within a year or so of it coming into effect. So it entered into force in April of 1997. Russia ratified, they ascended in November of 97, and Ukraine ascended in October of 98. So signing up means you're under no legal obligation to do anything, but there's a sort of obligation that you're not going to do anything before ratification that's going to affect the purpose of the treaty. And ratify means it's a formal act where you consent to become bound by the treaty upon its entry into force. So both Russia and Ukraine have signed and ascended. So they're both fully bound by the CWC. Now, riot control agents are defined, if you look on the OPCW's website, any chemical not listed in the schedule that can produce rapidly in human sensory irritation or disabling physical effects, which disappear within a short time following termination of exposure. So it's pretty clear what a riot control agent is. So just to circle back, Article 1 of the CWC, every party that signs up for this thing, that's ratified their commitment to this, cannot use riot control agents as a method of warfare. It's black and white, absolutely crystal clear. So let's look at a couple of case studies of where chemical weapons have been used in other parts of the world in the last 20 years or 10 years. The first is Islamic State in Iraq. So when they finally liberated Mosul, they found that Mosul University had been partially, or parts of it had been converted into a facility to manufacture a type of mustard gas or mustard agent. And the fighters actually used chemical containing mortars, so mustard and a couple other things, in attacking coalition forces. Now, what does that mean under the CWC? Well, it doesn't matter who it is, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, whatever. They're not a state. They're not a signatory to the CWC. So how are you going to prosecute them? There's other more important things. This is just an example to show that in the modern era, chemical weapons are still very much a threat, especially in terrorism these days.
And how effective actually was this in their use?
As far as I know, there was a lot of injury caused by inhalation and a little bit by contact. I'm not sure that as a method of killing people, it was all that effective. But the reporting was not great. So if there's anyone out there that does have a lot of more intimate first or second hand knowledge about the attacks, that'd be great. I don't have a whole lot of knowledge on them. But open source reporting, there's not all that much. I'm sure you'd be able to look up how many were injured in specific attacks. But in terms of a novel way to cause terror as a terrorist organization, it's that fear factor of releasing a chemical agent has massive ramifications.
Yeah.
The other case study to look at is the Assad regime's use of chemical warfare agents during their civil war period. Now, Syria is a member of OPCW. They have signed up. So from 2013, they're on the hook to follow the convention and do the right things. The UN did work with them, and all of the declared Syrian chemical warfare agents were externally removed from the country and destroyed. But it can't have been all of their agents unless they were supplied again by someone else, because it's been verified by UN agencies that they used sarin on their civilian population, as well as chlorine and a couple of things on multiple occasions. Now, to date, I know a couple of things were done. The Americans fired some missiles at to try and destroy some of the aircraft that were delivering the chemicals. But realistically, internationally, no one's done anything about this. No one has held the Assad regime for using chemical weapons against the CWC that they signed.
Yeah.
So that's the precedent. That's what we've got, is known use of sarin. It's probably the worst one that they used. That was verified by an international organization against civilian population, did not really have any ramifications, sort of major ramifications, in terms of no one went to the International Criminal Court, no one, the Assad regime is still in power, etc.
And what does sarin actually do to you?
So it's a nerve agent. So it's a highly lethal chemical warfare agent. It's like VX and sarin and Soman and Tabin and all these. They're there to kill.
Yeah.
It's a highly lethal nerve agent. So where this all kicked off was picking up reporting, and there's been reporting over 2 years now since the invasion, of the use of these in particular. So this is the K-51. RG stands for riot grenade. Developed by the Soviets in the 70s, been around forever. Basically, a pyrotechnic process starts burning inside the grenade, builds up a lot of gas, which is aerosolized powder, and it blasts a hole through the bottom of the grenade and spits out very, very hot aerosolized powder. Now, apparently, the K-51s contain chloropicrin, which is that one that we highlighted on the CWC's list. They're designed for use in confined spaces up to 400 square meters. So that's a lot of volume of gas that they release. The CWC says chloropicrin is considered a lung damaging agent. It's in agriculture, they use it to fumigate soil. Very powerful irritant, similar characteristics to tear gas. So chloropicrin, the K-51, would most certainly fall into the definition of riot control agent. Looking at some of these claims, where it kicked off for me in terms of interest in where and how have these been used is there are a lot of cases of these being reported in December, just gone, of K-51s being deployed. So tear gas isn't a gas per se. It's heated up aerosolized powder. It's designed for short term, etc. And these are sort of the typical symptoms that you might see: coughing, involuntary closure of the eyes, tear ducts being activated, all the rest of it. So there's a very distinct difference between that and involuntary twitching, which is like a nerve agent style attack, or some of the other ones have very characteristic effects. So tear gas is short term, and it's pretty clear to see when it's a tear gas riot control agent versus a lethal nerve agent, etc.
Well, and anyone who's done CBR and training in the military knows exactly what it's like to be hit with CS gas. So when you do training in the military, as you know bloody better than I, you will get, for your training for chemical warfare environments, you will get taken into a tent with a small amount of CS gas, and to double check that all you know how to purge your mask correctly and seal everything correctly. And it is a very, very weird sensation when you take your mask off. It gets in your eyes and your lungs and whatever. It's a bloody horrible thing.
Oh, it's the gift that keeps on giving.
It does keep, and it can reignite bloody an hour on in your getting a hot shower too.
Horrible stuff.
Yeah.
So let's circle right back, and I started to go down this rabbit hole of K51 use, and there it's heaps of it on both sides. The earliest I found in the time I had to do this research, and there might be other examples around this time, is video footage, and you can see some of this is on RT. So a public network showing these crates of the K51. So this is right back when Russia had stationed forces prior to the full-scale invasion in 2015. Pretty clear example. No, I couldn't really find anything of them being used until you get to around 2022. Excuse me. And there are lots of examples through 2022. So this one clearly shows Russians affixing a K51 to this drone. And there's been a couple of examples where the Ukrainians are like, hey, we've recovered Russian drones that were dropping K51. So this is back in 2022. There are other tweets and posts and Telegram messages of K51s being used against the Ukrainians by the Russians. So you can see here that he's going to fly his drone up. He's going to drop this K51 into, assuming this is a Ukrainian position, he's going to drop this into a bunker or wherever they're hiding out in a bombed out house. And the K51 releases enough gas, causes the irritation, assuming these guys don't have gas masks, and it's going to force them to evacuate. So it's not lethal. This is designed to force the evacuation. And we'll get into why you would use this on the battlefield.
Yeah.
So we'll watch there. You can start to see now there wasn't an explosion. There wasn't any flame or any fragmentation or blast effect that was clearly observable, but you can see this thick white smoke. Now, is that obscuration smoke? Is it chloropicrin? Is it something else? I don't know. There's no way to tell unless you were to test the area immediately after. There's no real way that you can figure out what that is. But we will see, I don't know if it's already passed, but you do see the guys legging it to get away from that gas.
Yeah.
Might be on one of the other videos that we've got shortly after. Now, this is from October of 2022. This is a Telegram channel where you see an American-speaking foreign fighter fighting on the side of the Ukraine. And as he pans around his room, you can clearly see what looks like K51
yeah, 100%.
Grenades sitting on his
bench top there. Oil filters. They're K51 grenades.
In December of 22, the Ukrainian Navy asserted that a lot of these chloropicrin grenades were being dropped from drones by the Russians onto Ukrainian positions, and that they had to carry out protective actions, including putting on gas masks as a result. You've got a one from the other side now. So this is January of last year, 2023. And I remember you said you saw this one. When this came out, I did a lot of research and I asked a lot of people, never really got an answer what this is. So they appear to be kamikaze style FPVs, and they've got these tubes. Now these tubes could be anything. They could be explosive. They could be, survey beacons. They could be a raft of things. But when he gets into the freezer in a sec, it looks like there's some kind of chemical agent. And he does talk about the guy talking in the Telegram video, the Ukrainian, he does talk about chemicals. So what this is, I'm not sure. You can see a couple of explosive style payloads there, I think. But what these tubes are, what they're designed to do, I don't know.
Yeah. I remember this being heavily speculated that it was some sort of chemical agent, especially because they're saying, well, if you're storing it, below room temperature, storing it in a freezer or fridge, and then people speculate what then that could be.
Yeah, it's not normal. Compared to, you don't need to store explosives in the freezer. So yeah, what it is, I'm not sure. We'll just jump forward to so that's in the freezer there. So what they are, don't know. And again, there might be someone out there who's got more information on this, being 12 months old now.
Yeah, it's a scary thing though, that, you know, you're making up things like this, like dirty style bombs.
Yeah, there's accusations on both sides of non-conventional right control agents being developed and fielded. Definitely.
Well, the podcast I just had on, who he goes by the name Dave, but Aussie bloke, who's in hospital at the moment, but he'll be all right. He was hit with riot control agents first, and then that's when they were moving out through their positions and got hit by then a drone ordnance as well as artillery ordnance. But yeah, like straight like, oh yeah, Willie, it's happening. Like, you know, we did. It's 100% being these CS type riot control agents being used. If not, and I'd say, you know, there's probably a good chance other agents, more lethal ones, are being used as well.
Absolutely. Here's another case from March of last year. Same deal. There's a distinct green housing on the bottom of this one, which you'll see in the next video, that you got a sneak peek for. I think it's not this one, it's the one after, but this is exactly what you were just talking about. Oh, hang on. I don't kill that sound. So this is a dual drone attack by the Russians onto a Ukrainian position. You can see the drone there. And as we pan around, you're going to see, I'll call it out when it happens, but it drops what presumably is a right control agent. So just as he stops, he's about to drop it. And I don't know if you saw it or not.
Yeah, I just saw it right as he stops. You see it just drop.
It drops a grenade, and I'm assuming it's some kind of riot grenade. And the guys in the bunker here, as they're getting gassed, make a decision to leave. And the drone currently doing the filming then drops a must be a high explosive fragmentation submunition on them. So you see there, he's just released it. Won't go on with the rest of the film so that we don't get YouTube censored. But it explodes, doesn't kill him, doesn't kill the other guy, but it's an example of a mixed mode attack.
Yeah.
One
used to break up the stalemates we're seeing in the trench warfare. You know, if you have
absolutely
bunkers, how are you getting these guys up out of the bunkers to actually get them? And this is why we're seeing this develop more and more in the last couple of months, is as nothing's moving on the front line of these trench systems, we're going to start seeing more of this happening. Yeah,
absolutely. And we'll get to a couple more of those, but last December in particular, there's been a huge spike in alleged Russian use. So here's a Telegram channel published what looked like a K-51 in this bottom picture. This top video, which I'll play now, is not that post, but it's something very similar to show, again, that this grenade that's being dropped is not pyrotechnic. It's not explosive. It's not a stun grenade. It's there specifically to release a riot control agent. So you'll see as the gas is built up, guys that are in that protected area can't handle that, obviously don't have gas masks, and like the person, Dave, that you just alluded to, they've got to just escape that gas. And the idea would be you flush guys out of protected areas where they can be targeted by other vectors. So there they go there. You can call in artillery, you can call in other drone attack platforms. Now, in April of last year, again, the Russian side this time started reporting that the Ukrainians had used a internally produced Ukrainian riot control agent, tear gas, on their drones to attack the Russians. October of last year, the Russians put out a big report claiming they made all these claims about Ukraine's use of toxic chemicals. And in December, the Ukrainians put out their version, right? Basically saying, hey, we've seen a huge ramp up of Russian attacks using these grenades and other chemicals. 4th of December, there's an example where they've recovered. So the Ukrainians are showing, hey, here's another example. The Russians are massively ramping up their use of these right control agents for the mixed mode attacks. And then there's a couple of new ones. Now, I've never heard of either of these before. So if you've got a listener that knows more about these, or someone that's been there that's seen them, excuse me, these are all recently deployed ones from what I can tell, but same concept, right control agent. The Ukrainians are stating that since the full-scale invasion, they've got 465 documented cases of Russian chemical ammunition. And 81 of those 465 occurred in just December of last year. So that it does seem to be a massive ramp up in the use, as we've just said, to flush out dudes, right? So police use right control agents generally in the open, right, where a crowd is sort of forced away from a direction, or it breaks up a crowd, or it discourages whatever they're doing, as opposed to using it on the battlefield in these partially confined spaces where you don't know if it's sarin, smoke, or right control agent. It can cause a lot of panic, or, as what seems to be the Russian tactic, it's going to force people out into the open where they can be targeted by other kinetic vectors.
Yeah. Yeah, so using it as a complex attack, you're dropping this to break it up and then hit them with another drone, like we saw drones working in tandem, or artillery, or whatever, to break up that stalemate that we've seen the last couple of months.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems to be, again, how would you prove it? I don't know, but it does seem to be that both sides are using right control agents in contravention to the CWC. It does appear to be that way.
Yeah.
So that's it for the right control agent side of it. I did want to now get into a couple of other things that the Russians have reported, and this now falls into the sabotage space. So Russia has made several claims from the start of the full-scale invasion where Ukrainian saboteurs have conducted kinetic attacks targeting chemical stockpiles. So things like nitric acid, ammonia. And this gets into the legal grey area of, are you targeting something that is going to the war effort of the other side? Or are you targeting something that's going to release a gas that you hope is going to have a psychological effect on the enemy or could injure civilians? So plausible deniability. So the first one is from March 2022. Russians claim that the Ukrainians deliberately attacked an ammonia storage tank. So ammonia is a highly toxic industrial chemical that's used for a raft of things, including making nitric acid, which can be used to make fireworks, explosives, and fertilizers. The counterclaim by the Ukrainians is it was actually a Russian airstrike that went amiss and they hit that structure.
Right.
Massive release of gas, ammonia gas, huge plume, but because of the wind direction, no one was affected. The next one is a claimed Ukrainian attack which blew up nitric acid storage containers for provocative purposes. So again, nitric acid is, its main job in industry is to make fertilizer. That's about 80% of world's consumption of nitric acid, but it is also extremely good at making fireworks and explosives. Right. You'll notice there the color of the plume. So this is a consistent thing that you'll see in a few more cases. And for those people listening, they might recognize that plume from another accident from the last couple of years. This is another sabotage event from May of 22, presumably ammonium nitrate fertilizer, because ammonium nitrate is notorious for releasing this, what they call the red or brown fumes of death. So the clue is in the name, not a great thing to be breathing, massive inhalation hazard from nitrogen oxide, nitrogen dioxide, the NOx fumes is what they refer to them as. Then you've got, again in May, attack on nitric acid, and in June, unknown toxic chemicals, but deliberately targeted on rail tankers, I believe. And also in June of 22, targeting of an ammonium pipeline. So not a storage tank per se, but you can see that massive cloud of not fit for human consumption smoke, it looks like, traveling through the forested area there.
God. I know guys in Mariupol too who they were like, oh, they didn't say who was at fault, but they're saying that because we're fighting an industrial zone, that the amount of chemicals and shit that they were breathing in, they're like, oh, it was insane. Just the amount of chemical, like it's not chemical warfare, I guess. You're in an industrial zone because the active fighting in Mariupol is different to these being specifically targeted. But that became a huge issue for them.
Well, that's a really good segue into that. Well, we've got a couple more to look at, but
yeah.
That's my question. When does an act of sabotage blur over into a deliberate act that you know is going to release a chemical that under the CWC's definition would be considered use of chemical weapons?
Yeah.
If you know that it's going to affect civilian population, or if you know that your enemy is going to inhale a toxic chemical that you've deliberately released.
Yes.
Are we blurring the lines? I don't know. Next example, and this is a bit of a sad one. The brewery got attacked. Its ammonia-based cooling system apparently was targeted, released a huge plume of, again, ammonia gas, I should say. Now, this is what I was referring to before. So this is the 2020 Port of Beirut blast. This is where they had 2,750 ton of ammonium nitrate dumped into a warehouse along with some tires and some fireworks and other bits and pieces. And the resulting fire created this huge explosion. Very distinct red fumes of death. So that is purely an accident. But when does a deliberate act of sabotage become a deliberate chemical release, regardless of, who did it? The other one, again, this is purely an accident. So there's no one deliberately doing this. This was at a port in Jordan where this chlorine tank was something broke and the tank got ruptured as it was getting either loaded or unloaded on the port there, and it released that huge chlorine gas cloud, and lots of people were injured from that.
God.
So again, that's an accident, but when does a deliberate equivalent become an act of chemical warfare?
Yeah.
So that sort of sums up the chemical part, and I guess that is the end of my presentation, mate.
Oh, bloody fantastic. Well, I raised a good question about when does the purposeful targeting of something like that become an act of chemical warfare, and when is it sabotage against industry? Like, yeah, and to me, it's situationally dependent, isn't it? But we have seen a lot of these attacks from Ukraine and Russia against these areas. Is it sabotaging, or is it, does it have is it disguised as sabotage, but that it is to create a chemical fallout from there?
And you can circle all the way back now to the Zaporizhia power plant or any radiological or dirty bomb attack. When is it deliberate or false flag or plausibly deniable? But it's a release nonetheless.
Yeah. Oh, mate, absolutely. And I think what we cover in this is that with most of this, with a lot of it, that both sides are in breach of treaties that have been signed, especially chemical weapons ones with the riot control. People go, but it's not sarin. But there's like we've spoken about, there's an ethical battle here and there's a legal battle as well. I've been hit with CS gas on multiple occasions and I'm still here. But the legal battle says, but that cannot be used here. And we've seen that pretty clear examples, maybe not beyond reasonable doubt in a court situation, but that these are being used by both sides on the battlefield, and an increase in the use when we've seen a decrease in frontline movement and an increase in the sort of statutory nature of the war. If things aren't moving, we're seeing an increase in this to try and break things up. And then as well with the mines as well, that, there's an ethical thing that if China invaded Australia, I'd probably be out there building these as well. But then there's the legal thing of, well, Russia hasn't signed on. You have signed on. Where is the legality sit there? And what has been brought forward before to bear of countries who have gone against these treaties. So it's a hard conversation to have there.
It's a few very, very difficult topics. If the aggressor is not privy to a convention and you are, but your existence is threatened, when do you stop caring about the international community's reaction in terms of breach of a treaty, because you've got to do something to survive? But are you going to then sour the relationship with countries that are supplying you money, weapons, support? It's a really, there isn't a clear right and wrong here. I think it's a very complicated issue.
Yeah, and one that I guess the legal side will talk about with a professional that we're planning on doing as well.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Mate, I cannot thank you enough for the amount of effort and time and everything you've put in for all this. Is bloody fantastic. And I think I myself learned a hell of a lot, and I think everyone else would have learned a heap as well.
You're welcome, mate. It was actually really enjoyed doing the research. I think there's lots of bits that maybe were incomplete, and there's probably a few things that we're not even aware of, but this is a good start. I think there's probably half a dozen further conversations that we could have with different people now to really drill down into these things and see what are the so what's here, what's going to happen.
Oh, mate, absolutely. And yeah, well, you'll be people be seeing your face again, and people know where my email is to reach out with any evidence or information or experience, whatever, as well below. My email will be then you can get in touch with us that way.
Too easy. Thanks, Willie.
Mate, well, I'll let you get back on with your day and your week.
Thanks, mate. Looking forward to the next one.
Cheers. Okay. Thank you, bro.
Cheers, mate. See ya.
See ya.